The small town of Alton, Illinois, had never seen anything like it. The summer air was warm and still when police arrived at a quiet apartment on Bolivar Street. The neighbors had reported a strange smell, something that didn't feel right. Inside that apartment, officers would stumble upon a scene so horrifying that even the most seasoned among them froze in disbelief. On the living room floor lay the body of a young woman, brutally murdered, her head severed from her body. That woman was Liese Dodd, just 22 years old and 7 months pregnant. One of the officers stepped outside, pale and shaken, unable to speak. Another called for backup, his voice trembling. In a town where crime was mostly limited to speeding tickets and small fights, this was unthinkable. The quiet street now echoed with sirens, flashing red and blue lights painting the walls of every house nearby. Nobody could understand why anyone would do such a thing, or who could be capable of it. As word spread, residents peeked through curtains, whispering. Mothers pulled their children close. And in that moment, one question hung in the air like smoke. Who could have done this to her? Hours earlier, the day had started normally for Liese. She had been preparing for her baby shower. Her friends were planning decorations, and her mother had called to ask what kind of cake she wanted. Liese had laughed. She was finally getting excited about being a mom. For the first time in months, things seemed to be settling down. But behind her gentle smile, there was something darker, something she had been hiding from most people. Her relationship with her boyfriend, Dondria Holloway, had always been unstable. He was charming one moment, cruel the next. Their arguments were loud, sometimes violent, and neighbors often heard things thrown against the walls. Liese had tried to leave him before, but he always found his way back into her life, promising to change. She believed him, or maybe she just wanted to believe. Her mother, Heidi, had begged her to end it for good, to think about her baby. But Liese didn't want to raise a child alone. He just gets angry sometimes, she would say softly, trying to convince herself that things weren't as bad as they seemed. The week before her death, Liese had texted a friend that she planned to finally move away, to start over. "I just want peace," she wrote. That message would later haunt everyone who loved her. On the night of June 9th, Liese's phone went silent. Her mother called several times. No answer. Texts went unread. At first, Heidi thought maybe her daughter had fallen asleep early. But as morning came and still no reply, worry began to crawl up her spine. By afternoon, she drove to Liese's apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal, until she stepped further in. The couch cushions were tossed aside, a lamp knocked over. There was something strange on the floor, something dark and sticky. Heidi's hands began to shake as she called out, "Liese?" When she pushed open the bedroom door, the scream that tore from her throat was so loud it startled the neighbors. What she saw inside would haunt her forever. Police would arrive minutes later. They taped off the building and led Heidi outside, her face white with shock. Reporters soon gathered, trying to piece together the horror that had just unfolded. And as investigators began their search for the person responsible, one name kept coming up again and again: Dondria Holloway. He had disappeared. And with that, the town of Alton realized this was no random act of violence. This was something far more personal, far more terrifying. By the next morning, Alton was no longer a quiet town. News vans lined the streets, cameras flashing as police officers moved in and out of the apartment complex. The story had spread fast. A young pregnant woman murdered, beheaded in her own home. Every headline screamed the same chilling truth. A monster was still out there. Detectives worked around the clock. Inside the apartment, they found signs of a violent struggle, broken glass, a torn piece of clothing, and drops of blood that led toward the kitchen. Liese's phone was shattered on the floor, the screen cracked in half. Her baby's ultrasound photo lay nearby, stained and bent. Investigators knew right away this wasn't the work of a stranger. Whoever did this had known her, been close enough to enter without force, close enough to make her feel safe. All clues pointed to one man, Dondria Holloway, her boyfriend. Holloway was 22, the same age as Liese. People in town described him as quiet, but unpredictable. He could be sweet one day and angry the next. Some said he had a temper that could explode at any moment. Others said he seemed lost, a man fighting his own demons. But one thing everyone agreed on: his relationship with Liese had been falling apart. Friends told detectives that Liese was finally done with him. She had told him she didn't want him at the baby shower, that she wanted space, that she was ready to start a new life without him. And that was when everything began to spiral. Police traced Holloway's last known movements through surveillance cameras around town. The footage showed him walking near Liese's apartment late on the night of June 9th. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had no reason to come by, except one: anger. When police searched his mother's home, they found his clothes in a trash bag, covered in what looked like blood. DNA tests would later confirm it was Liese's. Meanwhile, Heidi, Liese's mother, sat in silence at the police station. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She kept replaying the last conversation she'd had with her daughter. Liese had said she felt strange about seeing Dundria again. She was nervous, but didn't explain why. Now, that unease made sense. The detectives assured Heidi that they were closing in on him. They just needed to find out where he was hiding. That evening, about 30 miles away in the nearby town of Gillespie, a call came in to 911. A man had been acting strangely at a local gas station, yelling at customers, talking to himself, refusing to leave. Officers arrived and immediately recognized him from the photos circulating among police departments. It was Dundria Holloway. He didn't resist arrest. Instead, he smiled as if he didn't care what came next. Officers said he seemed emotionless, even calm, as they handcuffed him. One officer later described the moment. He looked right at me and said, "It's over now," like he knew exactly what he'd done. When they brought him in, he refused to answer most questions, but in fragments, he said enough to confirm everyone's worst fear. He and Liese had argued that night, about their relationship, about the baby, and in a violent rage he did something no human should ever do. The room went silent as detectives listened to his confession. Some couldn't even stay. The brutality of what he described was unbearable. By the next day, the story was everywhere. People in Alton gathered outside Liese's apartment with candles, flowers, and soft toys for the baby that would never be born. Reporters tried to get statements from family members, but no one could find the right words. A community was broken. A mother had lost her daughter, and a child had been stolen from the world before she ever had a chance to live. But what no one knew yet was that this case was far from over. There was something else hidden in Liese's past, something that would soon make the tragedy even darker. The courtroom in Madison County was silent as people filled every seat. Reporters, friends, and grieving neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the man who had shattered so many lives. Dundria Holloway. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his face showed no emotion. He didn't look up, he didn't speak, he just stared ahead, as if the world around him didn't exist. Liese's mother, Heidi Noel, sat in the front row, clutching a framed photo of her daughter and unborn granddaughter. Her hands trembled as the prosecutor described what had happened on that terrible night. The details were so gruesome that even the judge paused more than once. It wasn't just a murder. It was cruelty beyond understanding. The prosecutor told the jury that the relationship between Liese and Holloway had been collapsing for months. He was possessive, angry, and controlling. When she tried to break free, he snapped. Evidence showed that during their final argument, he lost control completely. What followed was something no one could imagine, a fit of rage that turned into one of the most horrifying crimes in Illinois history. The defense tried to claim Holloway was mentally unstable, that he didn't understand what he was doing. But no one in that courtroom believed it. Every piece of evidence told the same story. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had even tried to cover his tracks before leaving the apartment. Outside the courthouse, people held signs demanding justice for Liese and her baby. The town that once felt peaceful now carried a wound that would never fully heal. News stations replayed the story every hour. Pregnant woman beheaded by boyfriend in Alton. And across America, viewers struggled to understand how something so evil could happen in such a quiet place. Inside, the trial continued for days. Forensic experts, neighbors, and even Lise's closest friend has testified. They talked about how afraid she had been, how she had tried to leave, and how she always hoped he would change. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of a woman who wanted nothing more than peace, and a man who couldn't stand to lose control. When it came time for sentencing, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. The judge looked directly at Holloway and said, "What you did is beyond forgiveness. You not only took one innocent life, but two." He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, and dismembering a human body. The room filled with tears and relief as the words "life imprisonment" echoed through the court. But for Heidi, justice didn't erase the pain. Outside, she spoke softly to reporters. "My daughter was beautiful," she said, tears streaming down her face. She was excited to be a mom. She deserved to live, and so did her baby. As months passed, people in Alton continued to visit the small memorial outside Lisa's apartment. Flowers, candles, and tiny baby shoes left by strangers who never even knew her. In the end, her story became a symbol of how love can turn into danger, how silence can hide suffering, and how every act of violence leaves behind a trail of broken hearts. And even though Holloway now sits behind bars, the memory of that night, the night the world lost Liese Dodd and her unborn child, still lingers like a shadow over the town. The case may be closed, but for those who knew her, it never truly ends, because some wounds never heal.